Hi everyone, I'm Lucy and today I am here with a video telling you the top 5 tips on how to find flats and flatmates in London. If you've never lived in London before, then you might not be aware, but finding somewhere to live in London is like upsettingly difficult. Not only is it a super expensive place to live, it's also very difficult to be able to find somewhere if you're coming in kind of not knowing anyone, not having a set kind of group that you're going to live with. And so I'm hoping that these 5 tips are going to make it a lot easier for you to kind of figure out how to live in what I think is one of the best cities in the world, but also one of the most expensive and difficult to find somewhere to live in. So if you like this video, I'm going to be doing tons like this on how to live in London, how to make the most of it, and how to take advantage of great deals. So please click the subscribe button, which is somewhere in this vicinity, and if there are any videos that you want to see, leave them in the comments below. Okay, let's get started. Tip number 1. What kind of living situation are you going into? I kind of define this in 3 different groups. If you're a young person moving to London for the first time, you are most likely either a first year student at university going into student halls, you are a second year university student or a master's or PhD student going into private rented accommodation, or you are a part of the third group, which is not to do with university, which is just someone moving to London for the first time. If you're in one of these groups, your living situation and the way that you go about looking for somewhere to live will probably be quite different from the other 2 groups. So if you're a first year university student, hopefully your university will provide you with first year accommodation in student halls. There are exceptions to this. I was lucky enough, I'm technically an international student, or I was when I started. My parents lived in Germany when I started at King's College, so because I lived outside of the M25 ring road, which is what they determine as living in London, I was guaranteed 1 year of housing. Not necessarily in my first year, which is super less than helpful, but I was lucky that I did get a room for my first year, so I went into student halls and didn't have to find somewhere. If this is you, then hopefully your university is providing you with tons of information about the kind of living situation you're going to be going into, how to choose the best hall for you, how to kind of apply for the halls and everything. So hopefully you are not being thrust out into the private sector. If you are one of the unfortunate people who does not get a room for your first year of university, then you fall into the group of second year university students who are looking for private rented accommodation. In English universities, unlike in the States, you only get 1 year of kind of being in student halls or student residence. This does obviously change depending on what university you're at and where you are. Like Oxford and Cambridge are more likely to keep you on in student halls for another couple of years, whereas in London, because there's such little student accommodation available, 1 year and you're done. As a second year university student, you are most likely with a group of people that you know you want to live with and you are looking together as a collective. That's how most people tend to do it. It's how I did it. Do I have many regrets? All of them. But that is typically how you tend to search for accommodation as a group that you know you want to live together. And sometimes universities provide private rented accommodation you can apply for, like the University of London has a kind of lot of different apartments in different places in London, and you can apply for those. But because there are so many different colleges in London that comprise the University of London and there are so many students, they are fairly competitive, and you're probably better looking at just kind of private rented as opposed to university private rented. Third group of people is young people who are just moving to London for the first time. You don't have anything to do with the university, you might be moving here for work, maybe you're moving here just because you want to try living in London, but either way you're obviously not going through university housing, so you were just looking for private rented accommodation. Following on from all of that, knowing what group you're falling into, is tip number 2. Know your budget. I cannot stress this enough. Rent in London is inordinately expensive, like eye-wateringly, upsettingly expensive. And it is definitely a financial commitment deciding to live in London, especially because most rental contracts run for 12 months. So you are committing to 12 months of whatever your rent is. When I was a student in my student hall, I believe I was paying about £195 a week. In my second apartment, it was £200 a week. Third flat was also £200 a week, and now I am living outside of central London. I'm paying £650 a week to live in a much bigger place. I live in a house now instead of a flat, which is fantastic, but it is just the the price in central London, which is where most people want to live, they want to live in those first 2 zones, it is eye-shatteringly expensive. So you need to be very aware of what your budget is. The amount of friends that I've had that have signed rental agreements and contracts and have then realised that they can't continue to pay the rent halfway through the year, or they go into it knowing full well they can't afford a full year of rent, is just staggering. Please be aware of your budget, not just because it then puts you in the situation of having to find somewhere else to live, and that's very stressful, but if you're living with people, you are also putting that burden on them by saying, actually, I'm gonna have to move out because I can't afford to pay for this flat that we agreed to live in together. So you become that person that then nobody wants to live with because you are totally unreliable. When it comes to thinking about the price of the place that you're living, it's not just the cost of the room or the flat that you're renting that you need to consider. It's also utilities, whether or not they're included. So if you're having to pay gas, electricity, Wi-Fi on top of your rent, you need to think about whether or not you're paying council tax. Council tax in London is extremely expensive. I can't think of anywhere in the UK actually that it's not particularly expensive, but in London it really is. And if you're a student, you are exempt from it, which is fantastic. If you live in a property with 2 or more, it might be 3, I'll check that, but if you're living in a property with 2 or 3 students, the entire property is exempt from council tax. If you're not a student, you have to pay it, and it's against the law not to pay it, so you don't really have a whole lot of ways around that. But it's definitely something to consider in terms of what kind of place you're going to live, how big it is, what the value of it is, which I think you can usually find on Zoopla or Rightmove when you're looking at it, and also where it is, because the location determines the council tax. I had to get up and deal with a bug. There was a bug situation. One of the joys of living in an old house, giant spiders. I hate spiders. So the last main thing that you need to consider when you're thinking about price is zone. London is split into 6, 7 zones. 6 or 7. And these zones are a big factor in how much property is, but also how much travel is. So while the further you go out in the zones, the cheaper it is to rent somewhere, it then becomes more expensive to travel into the centre of London. For those of you who don't know, in London you use an Oyster card. So the last main thing that you need to think about in terms of price is which zone of London you want to live in. London is split into travel zones, and you travel these zones using an Oyster card. So there are 2 different types of Oyster cards. I'm gonna see if I can actually pull this out. When you move to London, make sure you get an Oyster card holder. These things are just, I have like 8 of them. And just, you can get them anywhere for free. Please don't pay for one, because you can pick them up whenever someone's doing something promotional, like Starbucks. They hand out these Oyster cards. Yeah, and it makes it a lot easier than having to pull it out of your purse or your wallet all the time. That's a tangent, but yeah, moving to London, get an Oyster card holder. Yes, this one is from Hamilton. I did go and see Hamilton, and it's amazing. So there are different kinds of Oyster cards. So this is just kind of a normal one that you can get from any kiosk. I think you can get them from the Oyster machines. We used to have lots of ticket kiosks in all of the underground stations, but now they've started closing all of the ticket kiosks. So I believe that you can get these from the ticket machines now, but I'm not entirely sure. But Oyster cards cost £5, and that's a deposit when you return the Oyster card. If you return the Oyster card, you do get the £5 back. It works like a phone top-up. You stick them on a machine, you tell them how much you want to put on it, and it loads your Oyster card up for you. This is a student Oyster card, so I don't think there's an upper age limit on it, but it's the 18+ student Oyster card, because if you're under 18 then you have a zip card, and that's a whole different thing. But this gives me a discount on travel cards. Travel cards are weekly, daily, monthly and annual tickets. So an annual travel card from zone 1 to 3 I think is about £900. I usually do the monthly, which with my student card, as opposed to just a normal Oyster card, is £100 for a month from zones 1 to 3, whereas on the normal Oyster card it's £130. I also have a 16 to 25 rail card, which I put on top of this, which then gives you the discount on the pay-as-you-go travel, and you can also do that on the normal Oyster cards. I am aware that I have 3 Oyster cards and I'm one person, but my parents come up to London sometimes, I have friends that come and visit me, and having an Oyster card just makes it so much easier than having to stop and buy tickets every single day. It's also a lot cheaper. So that's just a side note tangent. So bearing that in mind, traveling with Oyster is definitely the easiest way to do it. You can travel contactless, but I find it a lot easier to have an Oyster card because you can put the travel card on it if you're traveling every day, which is a lot easier than having to do contactless and figure out what the upper boundary is. Determining what zone you're going to live in determines what price you're going to be paying to get in and out of central London, so you need to think about where you need to be. Which brings me to point number 3. Location. Thinking about all of this transport and travel and all of those kind of things, you really need to think about where in London you want to live. London is split into very distinctive neighbourhoods and boroughs. You have the south of London, which is southwest, southeast, and then you have north of the river, which is west central, northwest, northeast. Is there just an N? It determines by postcode, so you have SW, SE, etc. and so forth. So then within each of these areas you will have different neighbourhoods. I live in the southwest of London, which I really like, and I live in zone 3 as I mentioned before. I have lived in southeast London previously. I lived in 3 different flats in southeast London, kind of in and around Waterloo. I am not someone suited to living smack in the middle of London. I really enjoyed it my first year, but then the second and third year it just kind of got too much and became a little overwhelming for me. So I moved a little bit further out with my flatmate, and we now live in a more kind of residential area, but in the sense that it has kind of its own big supermarket, it's got shops, it has a cinema, it has all of the things that I need on a day-to-day basis without having to go all the way into central London. Knowing your kind of amenities around you and what you consider a must-have is something really important to consider before you choose an area or where you want to live. As an example of this, I had a friend who just moved into a new flat with her boyfriend, and her 2 conditions, she had no conditions other than the fact that she wanted to be walking distance from a Lidl and a gym. That was what she was keeping in mind when she was looking for a flat. So you just need to think about what is really important to you to have close by. So for me, my main requirement was I wanted a nice NHS local surgery, because the last 3 that I'd had were all King's College sponsored, or they were local and just too busy. And I also wanted to have a supermarket quite close by, as well as somewhere that I could park my car. When you're thinking about what location you want to live in, I cannot recommend highly enough going to actually have a look around the local kind of bits and pieces around where you're thinking about moving into a flat. There is nothing worse than moving into somewhere that you think is going to be fantastic and then moving into this flat and then exploring the area and realizing actually this is not what you wanted. Before we moved to where we're currently living, we went and had a look around the local kind of metropolitan area, around the high street, around all of the different bits and pieces of the neighborhood, and completely fell in love with it. It is really important to make sure that you are happy with where you're living, and also that it's somewhere that you're going to feel safe. Chances are there will be some point where you are either home alone, or you're walking home alone in the dark, or it's nighttime and you're by yourself. You want to make sure that it's somewhere that you feel a sense of security and safety. Where we live at the moment, I feel very safe because it's a residential area and it's a cul-de-sac. So it's not a through road, people aren't driving through it all the time. And I know my neighbours, which also makes me feel a lot safer, because I know that there are people who, if they heard me screaming in the middle of the night, they would probably come and knock on the door and make sure everything was okay. Whereas in the last flat that I lived in with my current flatmate, we were in a slightly sketchy area, in a sketchy neighbourhood, and I felt really unsafe in our flat when I was home alone at night, which was really just not nice. My 4th point, having just mentioned my wonderful, beautiful human being of a flatmate, flatmates. Living by yourself is just not a feasible option for most people because it is so expensive to rent a studio or a 1-bedroom flat. So living with flatmates is something that everybody ends up doing at some point during their time living in London. The girl that I'm living with at the moment, who is one of my best friends, I met as a complete stranger on the internet on Spare Room, and we have now been living together for 3 years, and we're going to continue living together for the foreseeable future. I really lucked out on Spare Room. I found 2 incredible flatmates to replace 2 really awful flatmates I had who moved out at the beginning of a year and just kind of left me in the lurch, and I was having to find new flatmates at the kind of drop of a hat so that I didn't get evicted for not paying the rent. And I was really lucky with the people that I found. So Spare Room, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of like Craigslist or Gumtree, but I feel slightly more secure, maybe. It is a place where you can advertise rooms for rent, or you can look for somewhere to live if you're looking to rent somewhere. So I was in a flat with 2 other girls in my second year of university, and then in November they both told me that they were moving out. So one of them was going to go and study abroad, which we knew, but the other girl, we did not get along. She didn't get along with anybody really from the sounds of things, and she just decided she was done and she was going to move out. So when it came around to kind of December, January, I was frantically looking for flatmates, which was an awful experience, and it caused me so much stress and anxiety. And I honestly don't know what I would have done if I hadn't found Camilla or my other flatmate Sasha. So I found these 2 complete strangers on the internet who found me, a complete stranger, and they moved in with me. It was a real chance of fate in finding Camilla, because she is now one of my best friends. She's like a sister to me, and we are really well suited to living together. But you need to be very aware of the kind of person that you are potentially moving in with, or that you are, and whether or not you're going to be compatible. When I say that, I don't mean like, oh my god, this person is probably a con artist, but more like, what kind of hours do they keep? Are they a student? Are they a professional? What kind of person are they? Are they really extroverted, and you know, you're maybe really introverted, so it probably wouldn't mesh very well. You need to keep in mind that this is someone you're going to be seeing sort of 12 hours a day, and when you leave home and then come back home, they're still going to be there. They're not going to leave because they live there. So it needs to be someone that you can see yourself saying, yeah, I could live with this person and happily get along with them. If you're in the position where you're looking to move in with people that you already know, like if you're a first year university student who's about to start their second year and you're looking to move in with friends that you've made and you've decided that you're going to move in together for your second year housing, make sure that they are reliable people. Going back to the people who abandoned me in the middle of my second year, they were not reliable. Just, it puts everyone in a position of kind of stress and resentment. So you need to make sure they're someone that you genuinely have faith in, that this person is going to be reliable, they're going to pay their rent on time, they're going to be someone that's going to be easy to live with, they're not going to make life really difficult for you, you're not too different to have a happy living situation. My 5th and final point, do your research. I cannot stress this enough. Please make sure you are researching every single aspect of kind of the legal and commitment side to finding a flat. There are so many scam artist agencies out there that are just trying to make money and have absolutely no cares in the world about what kind of living situation they are getting you into. I had a friend who did not fully read a contract that she signed before she moved into a flat. I did help her try and find her way out of this situation, but she did not fully read a contract and ended up moving into a flat that got repossessed by the bank because the landlord was not making payments on his mortgage. Their water was cut off, their electricity was cut off, their Wi-Fi was cut off, and their deposit was non-refundable. As soon as you start getting serious with signing with an agency for a particular property, make sure you go on Google, avoid Trustpilot because Trustpilot gives everybody 2 stars, but have a look and see what some of the Google reviews are, have a look and see what people are saying about the reliability of the agency, see what people are saying about how efficient they are when you get in touch with them about repairs, and just kind of make sure that they are as legit as you think that they are. Just make sure that you're aware of any kind of hidden fees. Be aware of the fact that you're going to have to pay contract fees and kind of agency fees. I don't know what the agency fees very vaguely cover, they're just kind of called agency fees. But just be aware that these are things you are going to have to pay. And if you're moving into a spare room, situation with someone where you were just renting a room from someone, ask for a written contract, because just moving in and paying them rent kind of off the cuff on a monthly situation gives you no protection. You have nothing to kind of pull as a defense if they say 2 days in advance, by the way, I need you out on Tuesday. So make sure you have some kind of written contract or agreement, and if you can, get it notarized. If not, just kind of having that written agreement that you've both signed and consented to, it does give you a bit of leverage if anything goes wrong or happens. I've probably made living in London sound like a terrifying experience that you need a degree in property and real estate for. It is really fantastic. I really love living in London, mainly for the fact that I can go out at 2 AM and half of London will still be open and still doing stuff. But living in London is really, it's a lot of fun. You just have to be very cautious and aware about it. I'm a very overly cautious person, so that kind of lends to me well, and that's why I'm hoping that this is going to help people from getting into the same mistakes that I've made or that friends have made. So I really hope that this has been of any help to you. If you liked this video, please subscribe. I will be doing more kind of living in London life videos, and as I said, if there's anything that you want to see on this channel, please leave it in the comments below. And I will see you next time. Bye.